Well, let's get more on this now with Dorotea Gucciardo. She's the Director of Development at Glia, which is a medical humanitarian organisation. Really good to have you with us, Dorotea. The UN says that it's suffered most of its UN personnel deaths in any conflict in history in this Gaza conflict. You yourself were in Gaza after this war broke out. How did it affect your work, this ever-present threat of possibly harm befalling you and your workers?
Well, I think before we went into Gaza, we were fully prepared for anything. We accepted that this was an incredibly high-risk environment, but we recognized the need that existed in Gaza. And so these were risks that I myself and every single one of the healthcare workers that I went in with were prepared to take. The situation on the ground is so dire that any amount of assistance is worth its weight in gold.
Yes, and when you hear those figures from the UN Secretary General, obviously it applies to other humanitarian organisations as well who've lost aid workers in Gaza. It must make you feel very despondent because your organisation, the UN and others, are simply trying to help those innocent civilians that are caught up in the conflict.
We are, and it's been pretty evident for months now that what we're witnessing is indiscriminate Israeli violence, indiscriminate killing of Palestinians throughout Gaza. And it's really devastating to witness families being displaced 2, 3, 4, 5 times, moving from one area to another, carrying whatever they can on their backs in search of a place of safety that simply doesn't exist. And then when you're in the hospitals themselves, these institutions that are supposed to be safe havens, they're supposed to be a refuge for or from harm, are actually sites of attack. And so it's really devastating to see the level of injury that you're seeing in the hospitals, the amount of fear on people's faces, those who are just in search of any kind of health care, and within a facility that doesn't have the resources it needs in order to provide the type of care that is required.
Now, despite the growing civilian death toll in Gaza and the rising death toll among humanitarian workers, we know the Israeli attack is continuing. Are you disappointed by the international response in terms of the pressure in order for these attacks and the conflict at large to stop?
Absolutely. I'm incredibly disappointed. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I think that there needs to be far more of an intervention. There must be accountability for what's happening right now. First and foremost, obviously, we need the fighting to stop. We need the Israeli army to pull out of Gaza in order to allow these borders to open up again. When the Israeli military took the Rafah crossing on May 6th, they effectively cut Gaza off completely. And what that meant in practice was over 12,000 Palestinians in Gaza requiring medical evacuation, now not having the option to leave. They had no way to access the life-saving care that they needed. And that's just one small thing. It cut off humanitarian aid, it cut off workers, it fully trapped Palestinians inside Gaza and made humanitarian work next to impossible. I've been incredibly disappointed and frustrated at the lack of the international community's push to not just reopen the Rafah crossing, but to end all of this.
Okay, Dorotea Gucciardo, we will have to leave it there, but the very best of luck with your ongoing work in Gaza, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.